Like a room full of all my favorite people, and a lot of them I haven't even met yet. So thank you all for coming. And thank you, Noreen, and thank you to our wonderful co-chairs of this event, Jenna and Carrie. I want to say, too, that there's something a little bit lovely and poignant and wonderful and lucky about our all being together in this room tonight, for this is the last year, the last time that we will have the first Novel Fete in this building. Next year, we are moving, as many of you probably know, to a beautiful new space in Brooklyn opposite the BAM complex, and as a part of that whole new ecosystem. And it's a very, very exciting move for us, but this building's been beloved to us for a long, long time, and we're glad that you're here to help us sort of see it off, as well as celebrating these wonderful new writers. Before we get started, I just wanted to say a brief word about the programs that you're supporting by being here tonight. The first is our Books for New York City Schools program, which through outreach to schools in need in the 5 boroughs and book drives throughout the year, helps supply books to public school libraries and classrooms and to youth organizations in the city. Donations including everything from picture books to fiction for high schoolers. We now have 75 schools and organizations signed on to the program, and that list grows each month. The second program is Kids Read, which invites more than 400 New York City public school students to the Center for Fiction to meet the YA and literary fiction writers they've been reading in class. This past year, we've been honored to work with such schools as the Academy for Young Writers in Brooklyn and Bronx and Vision Academy to bring students to see authors like Sonia Manzano, Sheila Shari, and Rafi Middlehead to talk about their work in writing. This summer also marked our first Kids Write program, a 4-day workshop intensive for students grades 10 through 12 who participated in our Kids Read program. We provide this service at no cost to the students or their schools as part of our continued efforts to make reading and writing accessible to children from all backgrounds. Just by buying a ticket to be here tonight, you guys are helping to keep these programs alive. Tonight's event has been, this is great news, one of our best and fastest selling fetes ever, which is exciting and a great tribute to our co-chairs' work. But there's a lot more work ahead. These are, as I don't need to tell anybody in this room, challenging times on a lot of fronts. And I know we all have a lot of organizations, especially around this time of year, that we want to support right now. Of course you should do that. But I hope that those of you who can will consider making an additional donation to the center before the end of the year to help us continue not just these programs, but everything we do. Reading and writing should not be a luxury reserved for the 1%. Our culture needs writers, needs fiction that challenges our complacency, our comfortable old assumptions about the world. And writers need support from every quarter to keep doing their work. I hope you'll join us in supporting them by supporting us. Happily, though, tonight is about more than fundraising. The greatest reason we're here is to celebrate our incredible 7 First Novel Prize finalists. These writers have been chosen by a distinguished panel of judges, including last year's winner, Kia Corthron, who won for her debut novel, The Castle Crossed the Magna Carta, along with Sonia Shung, Anne Landsman, Fiona Mazel, and Rick Moody. The winning writer will be announced tomorrow at our awards dinner and receives a $10,000 prize. But first, tonight, we'll get to hear from each of their wildly accomplished books. So without further ado, I'd like to invite in turn each writer to take the stage in alphabetical order, which is the final test of their language skills, and read a brief selection from their shortlisted work. And then, as Noreen said, we'll break for drinks, food, appreciation of the space, and more celebration. With that, please join me in welcoming these amazing writers.
Thank you. So I'm Bethany Ball, and I wrote What to Do About the Solomons. And so the little bit that I'm going to read now is from the first chapter. It's the last part. And it involves a park ranger, kibbutznik, named Guy Gever, who is either discovering himself as an artist or having a psychotic break. And Maya, who is another kibbutznik who has just come from Amsterdam, dejected, having failed as an artist in Europe. So anyway, here we go. Guy Gever is on the main road by the tree. He stacks the bushes he's ripped from the neighbor's patio, one on top of the other. It is obvious to him, if to no one else, that they are sacred shrubs with a high spiritual vibration. They are the bushes his forefathers walked beside and prayed beside, and they were longing to be freed from the earth. He will strap them to his back and take them to Moses, who waits on the other side of the Red Sea. They will speak to him as they did to Moses. Their roots have been under the ground for so long, doing their dark work. Maya heads out to the grove of pecan trees with her bag and her iPod. She walks through the Wadi along the path to the Yam Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. She has walked this path so many times. The water bends the light of the moon. The peacocks howl in the night. She hears shotgun fire, crazy Guy Gever and his hunting friends chasing poor animals through the fields, shooting birds from the sky and rabbits in the ground. Nothing ever changes around here. The trees lean down to her, caught in the wind. If she could grip the tip of one of them, it would launch her into the sky. She swallows the tranquilizers and sits down heavily on the small rocks of the shore. She pulls off her sandals and stretches her legs until they meet the quiet water. She sees the lights of Tiberias across the sea. Soon she will get up and wade in. What to do about Maya? Maya will take care of herself. Thank you very much. Oh, the voice says, so you're grieving, you're giving yourself a little mikvah, is that it? The Ethiopians have set up a perfectly good one just down the hill, you know. It's very clean. They are very devout. I hear they steal chlorine from the pool shed. Hands reach down under her arms and pull her away from the shore. She is dragged into brush, hidden from the shore and the path. Did you come all the way from Amsterdam to drown yourself? Have they no water in the Netherlands? Maya had, in fact, once been baptized by born-again Christians. They dosed her with methadone, prayed over her in a caravan, and nearly drowned her in the Amstel. Maya looks behind her to see Guy Gever, who turns a finger clockwise around his ear. We are the crazy ones in the kibbutz, you and I. She shakes her head. She is nothing like Guy Gever. You want something and you kill, but you don't want killing it to kill you, yet you're willing to kill yourself in order to kill it, if that's what it takes. Is that right? Maya blinks at him. That's no good now, is it? Life is heaped up full of disappointment. You have to be crazy enough to keep carrying one boulder up the hill after the other, to fill your pockets in the back of your truck with branches and sticks, to spend hours sweating the sun making sculptures and then setting them on fire. Guy takes off his filthy shirt and dries her face with it, and the dust returns to the earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. I dig up the dust and give the spirit back to God, but what you need, Maya, is an anchor. Guy Gever stands up and cuts the boughs of a pine with a large hunting knife he keeps strapped to his leg. He lays the boughs down on the ground. Here you go. This will be soft-like. Lie down here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. She lies on the ground while Guy Gever works. It is nice, finally, to have someone fuss over her. He builds a low wall the length of her body. I'll be right back, he tells her. And as he walks away, he wonders, should I just shoot her? He has his pistol in the truck under the seat. Should I just shoot her? He heard about all her problems. Before his mother died, she was best friends with Maya's mother, and over the years, Guy has heard about Maya's drug addictions, abortions, divorce, and worst of all for her mother, her brief conversion to Christianity. Should I shoot her? Maya lies on the soft boughs near sleeping. Her jeans are wet and cold on her skin. She half listens to the forest around her. It drones on above her. Guy Gever returns, glistening with sweat. He hoists a large flat paver from his shoulders and sets it carefully on a pile of cement blocks so that her body is only a third or so covered. The paver is warm. It retains heat from the sun. Don't want it to crush you, he says. I made that wall strong. You need to be anchored. Otherwise, you will fly up to the sky. You need to stay here and make your art, Guy says. Trust me, you want to stay here a little longer among the living. You'll find your way. He laughs and disappears again, and returns with another paver and sets this one over the top half of her body. He grunts as the paver settles on the blocks. Inside the tomb Guy has built, Maya is passed out and snoring. Guy Gever stands a moment swaying slightly over her. He has cared for her well. With his cell phone, he dials the number for his uncle, who mans the front gate. There's no answer, so he leaves a message with Maya's whereabouts. Then he walks away, scattering a handful of sunflower seeds and his cell phone into the sea. Now who's crazy, Guy says. After all, only a maniac can stop time. He knows the direction to go. Guy leaves his truck by the side of the Wadi and heads to Jordan, to the red rocks of Petra, on foot. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm delighted and honored to be here. I'm Julie Lekstrom-Himes, and I'm going to read from my novel, Michaela Margarita. I'm going to read a little ways into it, so I wanted to give you a little bit of context. The story begins, the novel begins with Mikhail having dinner with his friend and his mentor, Osip Mandelstam, at the restaurant in the Writers' Union in Moscow. It's about 1933. And there he meets, over the course of dinner, for the first time, a woman who he's aspired to, or he imagines he might be able to steal away from his friend. It's Mandelstam's mistress. Her name is Margarita. Later that night, Mandelstam is arrested for a poem he's written about Stalin. And the next morning, Bulgakov and Margarita meet again in Mandelstam's apartment while they're trying to protect some of his writing and gather some of it together to protect it. So I'm going to read a little ways into the story to give you a sense of Margarita's voice, who is, of course, an important character in this story. And I have to get my reading glasses. Sorry. All right. One of the poems Margarita found at the Mandelstam's apartment had been written about her. She had kept it apart from those she had given to Bulgakov. She recognized the early draft, different from the published one. It was an early version of his love. Reading it reminded her more sharply of its dissipation. They had taken risks in being together. She remembered a midsummer's party at Nadia's parents' farm. She hadn't planned to attend, but he had insisted. Even if they couldn't be together, he wanted to be able to see her in that landscape. She remembered Nadia pretending not to know, or perhaps fortifying herself against it, and she likewise pretending. She remembered their embrace, the pressure of the other woman's arm against the back of her neck, their speaking of some childhood memory they shared, as though they were actually talking about that. Osip approached them then, greeting her, slipping an arm around his wife's waist. Margarita blushed, and he beamed as though it was his doing. All seemed dangerously transparent. Later, when his visits to her apartment came less frequently, she sensed in him a recalculation of the risk. She remembered him telling the story of a former lover who had burned his belongings. He described looking down from his apartment one morning and seeing the clothes he had left with her, the books, a notebook, a few gifts, a flame in the street. He smiled as one who was mildly perplexed, yet not sufficiently bothered by the mystery to give it more thought. "I would never do such a thing," said Margarita. His expression was of muted skepticism. How could either of them know of what she might be capable under these unexplored circumstances? "Why did she hate you so much?" she asked. "I have no idea." He responded as if the thought itself was exhausting. How was it that this man, who could not commit a lie to the page, found it so easy to lie to her? Several months later, she would ask why he didn't simply break it off with her. Why not say the words, say he didn't want her anymore? He ran a finger up the length of her thigh. Of course he wanted her, he said. He looked amused at her misery. "Who wouldn't want this?" he said, trying to push his finger through the fabric of her undergarments. She shoved him away, and he got up to leave. "What's wrong with you?" she said. He'd rather invite her hatred. He'd rather she set fire to his possessions. Somehow it was easier that way. Somehow he could go on writing poems about love. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. How are we on sound? All right. It is such a pleasure to be here with you tonight. Thank you to the Center for Fiction for this wonderful honor. My name is Jaroslav Kalfaš. I was told not to forget to say that when I got up here, so that is my name. And I will be reading from my first novel titled Spaceman of Bohemia. Spaceman of Bohemia is about the first Czech astronaut who was sent on a solo mission to investigate a strange cosmic phenomenon. And on this journey, he encounters a friend on the spaceship, an arachnid alien creature who may or may not be real. I'll be reading from a latter part of the novel where Jakub has actually lost his ship, so he's not doing so well at this spaceman thing. And he is passing through the phenomenon that he was sent to investigate together with his friend, Untethered. So the chapter is titled... sorry, I thought I had the wrong chapter. The chapter is titled The Claw. I passed through the knot of time like sand, slipping away inside an hourglass, grain by grain, atom by atom. Time was not a line, but an awareness. I was no longer a body, but a series of pieces whistling as they bonded. I felt every cell within me. I could count them, name them, kill them, and resurrect them. Within the core, I was a tower made of fossil fragments. I could be disassembled and reassembled. If only someone knew the correct pressure point, I would turn into a pile of elements, running off to find another bond, like seasonal farmhands journeying from east to west. This is what elements do. They leap into darkness until something else catches hold of them. Energy has no consciousness. Force plots no schemes. Things crash into one another, form alliances until physics rip them apart and send them into opposite directions. The core offered no wisdom. It took away my senses. It made me live inside my own body, truly, made me a flash of matter without the power of reflection. I wasn't a human. I was a stream of dust. What did you expect? The core asked me. No, I asked that of myself, another projection, my desperation to ascribe personality and will to capricious outcomes of chaos. The true kings of the world, elements and particles, had no agenda except movement. I regained sight just as the core ejected me, then my wits, as I passed the core's calm atmosphere and collided with the storm of raging dust. The core had ejected me back into the world at the speed of a launching shuttle. The spiraling dust particles cut into my gloves and chest, forced cracks into my visor. I set my hands upon my helmet's lock, considering a swifter end. Death in space would be a brief affair. For 10 seconds, I would remain conscious. During this time, gases in my lungs and digestive system would cause a painful expansion of organs, leading to a rupture of my lungs and the release of oxygen into my circulatory system. Muscles would bloat to twice their current size, causing stretch marks and bruising. The sun would burn blisters into my cheeks and forehead. Saliva would boil off my tongue. After these 10 seconds of agony, my brain would asphyxiate and my consciousness would melt into the surrounding darkness. Cyanosis would turn my skin blue, my blood would boil, my mouth and nasal cavities would freeze until finally the heart would cease to function, rendering me an exquisite corpse, a dry, gaseous smurf at the altar of the Milky Way. I was ready for this quick passage when I felt a tap on my back. Hanush was soaring with me, his skin gray and shriveled, like a potato cooked in hot ashes. A blister appeared above his right lip. We were to move on together. I removed my hands from the helmet. Soon enough, the dust would cut through the suit far enough to depressurize it, and I could still have a cosmic death. I would use my 10 seconds to remove the suit and follow the example set by Laika. Allow for the vacuum to embalm me and preserve me as a wax figurine for future generations of explorers. The beginning has rejected us, Hanush said. It seems that way. We did not belong, he said. You love your riddles. The terrorizing fury of Chopra's dust turned into nothingness. We shot out of the cloud completely, once again subjects to the zen of deep space. There could not be much time left now. But I refused to check my suit, refused to check my oxygen count. I focused on my friend. Suddenly, I feared boredom more than death. If my friend died before me, what was there to do with the rest of my time? With the entirety of the universe in front of me, without his voice, I would have nothing to guide me as I choked. I reached for one of his legs and offered the jar of Nutella from my pocket. Yes, this will do, he said. I struggled to find words that were profound, some famous deathbed babble. I changed my mind. My words should not be profound. Instead, I called back to the quick village wisdom of my grandfather's drinking buddies, 8 liters of beer in, their heads closer to the table's surface with each passing minute. Wisdom about chickens faring so well without heads, or about my grandmother's strudel always having too many raisins, or about Icelandic songs always sounding as though they were composed on whispering ships sailing through ice, or about the inside of the very planet we occupy burning as hotly as the surface of the sun, yet here we complain about a scorching summer day, or about being so afraid to ask girls to dance as boys while being too brazen, even rude, to ask girls to dance as adults, the unifying postcoital feeling of thirst when 2 spent bodies crave bread and, greedily, another orgasm to reaffirm the fragile chemistry of love. Had the pub closed and taken away this only method of socialization, these village miners and butchers would surely have taken to traveling the earth like old school philosophers, exchanging barfly wisdom for pork chops. How could I contribute to this phenomenon? Perhaps with the greatest wisecrack of them all, one that could keep me awake for so many nights. Energy cannot be annihilated, and thus matter cannot be annihilated, and thus we all burn and destroy, and thus all we burn and destroy remains with and within us. We are living dumpsters. We have run out of antimatter, and now the eternal game is one of Tetris. How do we organize the self so as not to choke? I laughed. Hanush understood. And on that very pleasant note, thank you very much.
I'm Annabelle Kim, and I'd like to read a scene from Tiger Pelt in large font that takes place during the Korean War. And young Nam Kim is a farm boy in a remote South Korean village. That evening, with chores finished and his little brother put to bed, the boy stole out of the house and walked alone, beyond the farm, beyond the stream, to the woods at the foot of the mountains. He was restless and agitated. It had been months since he'd picked up a book or pencil. After less than an hour's trek, he came upon an odd sight. At the edge of the woods, in the center of a grassy clearing, was a rectangular patch of disturbed earth, clearly man-made. He crept closer. A layer of freshly dug earth covered the pit. He walked around its perimeter and knelt to sift a handful of moist dirt through his fingers. He thought he saw the dirt shift. His stomach lurched. Suddenly, a hand thrust forth from the earth. The boy fell to the ground with a smothered cry. Another hand erupted from the dirt. The hands clawed frantically, unearthing a human face. The buried man struggled to a seated position, and then to his hands and knees, and crawled away from the pit. He spat dirt and vomited, and then shuddered with dry heaves. The boy crouched in full view, frozen in shock. At length the man staggered to his feet. He looked back at the death pit, fell to his knees, groaning and coughing. The man raised himself with agonizing effort to his feet again. He was a giant, with angular features, an eagle beak for a nose. Spikes of straw-colored hair protruded from his head as the dirt fell away in clods to his massive bare feet. His astonishing cerulean eyes, pale orbs in their sunken sockets, searched wildly all around, but did not see the boy directly in front of him. He looked at the pit again. The monstrous, earth-crusted behemoth growled, "Fucking gooks." The boy crab-scuttled backwards on his palms and soles. "Motherfucker," yelled the blue-eyed Lazarus, lunging toward the sound, reaching over his shoulder for his phantom M1. "God damn it." The boy sprang to his feet and raised his hands over his head. In his best schoolhouse sing-song, he announced, "I am a boy." "Jesus fucking Christ," replied the earth-crusted monster, bent at the waist with his hands in defensive position, like a wrestler angling for a takedown. Perhaps, in extremis, the boy had chosen the wrong phrase? He stammered, "I am a girl." "Oh, for fucking Christ's sake," grunted the Lazarus, the adrenaline draining from his voice. The man steadied himself with his hands on his knees and looked the boy over. Although it was plain where this blue-eyed giant must hail from, the boy, in addition to seeking confirmation, wished to offer his respectful acknowledgement and carefully pronounced the Korean word for American. "Migook?" "I already figured out you're a fucking gook, kid," said the American. "What the hell's your name?" The boy elaborated with the Korean words for American person. "미국 사람?" "I know, you gook, he said, punctuating his affirmation with finger stabs at the boy's chest. "But what the hell is your name? I know you got a name. Is it Kim? Lee? Kong?" "Kim," the boy answered quickly, understanding now. "Kim." "Should have known. All you fucking gooks are named Kim." You Kim, me Doug, he grunted, pointing at his own chest. Doug Russell, Makata, the boy pronounced with reverence. Doug's pale blue eyes shone brighter from his smeared face. Well, you ain't as dumb as you look. The American giant suddenly started. Come on, Kim, we gotta start digging. They extracted another survivor from the pit, a South Korean army officer. The two soldiers and the boy now dug with their bare hands. It did not take long, as only a cursory layer of dirt had been thrown over the shallow grave. Most of the men in the pit had been shot dead. They dragged the corpses to the grass and laid them out side by side. Some of the prisoners of war had been burned and bound with barbed wire about the wrists, ankles, and faces. The handiwork of a godless people, young Nam thought. At the conclusion of the grueling task, 10 dead, mostly Korean, along with one barely conscious American Army officer, had been unearthed. The large American slung the officer's arm over his shoulder, exhorting, "Come on, sir, you can do it." And the 3 survivors of the mass execution hobbled behind the boy to the Kim family farm.
Sorry, I didn't look all the way in the back. I thought it was just a joke about the back. There are a lot of people back there, and I'm sure somebody's drinking whiskey, so cheers over there. My name is Simeon Marcellus. My first novel is entitled His Eyes to Grin. I want to thank the Center for Fiction for having me. I want to thank Catapult for allowing the Center for Fiction to invite me here. And I will be reading 2 selections from the first part of my novel that both take place at the University of Vermont. And the protagonist, David, is a freshman at this school. And it's fitting because I just had to grade a bunch of freshmen's English compositions papers. And I was so tired this morning that I dumped a sugar packet into the garbage can instead of my coffee. But now I am here, and I hope you enjoy. September 8th, 2010. I brushed my teeth in the bathroom across from the staircase in the middle of the 2nd floor of Patterson Hall. There were 3 other young men there, so I handled my affairs quickly, returning to stare at my sleeping roommate, Gary. I dressed and made my way to French. Once outside of my dorm, I stared at the collection of buildings called Redstone Campus. They seemed to have been built without regard for previous style. I logged into www.uvm.edu/campus/tour/archistory.html and browsed a page that revealed the campus buildings, architectural firms, periods, and dates of erection. Passing Southwick Music Hall, I learned that a firm from New York, McKim, Mead & White, had fashioned it in the colonial revival style, 1934, not the extension, 1975, that was influenced by brutalism. I had come across the name of the firm last year, and this seemed some sign to continue searching, but as I scrolled through all of the dates and styles hastily, I was struck with the guilt of living upon land that was stolen and constructed on in the style of other places so far away. October 18th, 2010. I lay in bed and gazed out the window. The earth felt as if it were waiting for what I did not know. There were 2 students walking in different directions next to the green. They smiled at each other. I could not hear their conversation, but their hand movements seemed to indicate that they would meet again later that night. I got out of bed for the first time all day. On the steps of the library, there was a man with sunglasses on, though it was dark. "I am the reckoning," he said. "I am the Lord of Light, and through me, all things are made small. He drank from the cup in his hand and projected again. I am the Lord of change. Most students walked by him. A few listened and chuckled with their friends. I am the Lord, and before me, all things are made infinitesimal. I faced the statue that resembled a dead and mutilated tree and walked on, trying not to be taken by his madness. November 11th, 2010, and I promise this is the last one. The building was a quarter of a mile away, so I opened the internet browser and searched for Vermont medicine psychology tests, stumbling upon a narrative I had not read before. The page heading was a picture of green mountains interrupted by straw huts and a leafless white tree. The portal told the story of eugenics at the university, starting with Professor Henry F. Perkins, director of the Department of Zoology. In the photograph dated 1928, he was clean-shaven and his mouth was turned down. Though confidence was depicted in this pose, the receding hairline, the small left eye, little imperfections seemed to hint at the mania that led to his descent into alcoholism. He had spent his life trying to weed this and other diseases from the genetic pool. I entered www.uvm.edu/swan-eugenics/partnersf.html and read the report of the Academic Advisory Committee, which presided over the Vermont Eugenics Survey. The study targeted those with the traits of mental illness called Huntington's chorea. They included the pirate families of Vermont, French Canadians living in houseboats on Lake Champlain, and the gypsies, those with dark skin because of African or Abenaki Native American blood. Between the years 1933 and 1938, 131 sterilizations took place. This number is skewed, as are most American surveys of the time, because the state did not keep proper records of the Native American population. As I looked to the internet under images of the Abenaki tribe, I saw many descendants who had strong European roots. As I tried to do more research on eugenics and Native Americans, the information became harder to find. Thank you.
I'm Susan Rivers. Oops. Can you hear me now? My novel is The Second Mrs. Hockaday. I'm thrilled to be here at the Center for Fiction and very thankful and a little disoriented because I was less than 24 hours ago, I was on a gravel road in South Carolina with nobody around for miles but me and the moon. And so thanks to the miracle of modern aviation, I'm with you all tonight. This novel is about, I'm going to preface this just a little bit, it's about war and its cost to human lives, to society, to the generations that follow, because it spans from 1865 to 1892. And it's also about race, gender, culture, and some things I can't identify or I'll spoil secrets that are in the book. But it's also primarily a book about marriage. This is a marriage that's marked by separation and shaped by suffering, his as well as hers, Placidia, the protagonist, as well as Griffith, her husband. But it's one that is also characterized by an intense, enduring connection. I'm going to read from part one. So it's 1865 and the war is over. Placidia Hockaday is 19. She was married very young. And she has been indicted for concealing the death of the issue of her body. Her husband Griffith, who has returned from a Union prison, he's been kept away by the war for over 2 years, has been determined, he knows for a fact he is definitely not the father of the child born by Placidia, and he is pushing for her prosecution harder than anyone. So she's carrying on a correspondence with her cousin, Mildred, who is trying to help her mount a defense, and Mildred has been trying to get her to reveal her secret. Who fathered this child? What were the circumstances, and how did the baby die? And Placidia refuses to give up her secret. So she responds in this letter telling her cousin what happened when she met with Griffith after he had asked her father for her hand in marriage. He'd visited her farm to buy a mule originally, but he left with the wife as well as the mule. So she comes into the study to talk with him before she decides if she's going to accept. He was thinner than I remembered from the day before, more careworn. It reminded me that he had lost his wife less than 3 months earlier and had nearly buried his baby son. In addition, he had been far from home fighting a war. His face was unshaven, and his uniform, I noticed, looked shabby in the morning light, as if he had tumbled it with a bag of rocks before donning it to call upon my father and stepmother. He was as strange to me as a manatee, dear cousin, or an Indian chief. And yet I recognized that he was fully at ease with the man who stood gazing at me from across the carpet. He was open, authentic, concealing nothing, not even the diminution of strength and spirits he was feeling considering his troubles. The scant value he placed on appearances was also evident in the way he looked at me. Since my 16th birthday, I have been conscious of how certain men, especially those who lack good breeding, study me as if I were a confection being wheeled past on a cart. A gleam of appetite sparks in their eyes as they take in my face. Their gaze moves to the rest of me and evaluates the substantive components along with the decorative ones, weighs the whole, and then returns to my face with the eyes now veiled by a scrim of pretense easily penetrated if they only knew, that attempts to feign mild admiration not yet linked to acquisition. The Major's black eyes, however, did not rove. They fixed on my face and remained there, as if plumbing a body of clear water for its depths. Because their lucent focus was fully unfiltered, I was able to detect the slightest quality of apprehension fluttering there. Not as if he feared to be revealed to me, but as if he doubted his right to engage my commitment on the same Spartan terms of self-disclosure. I cannot explain the impossible sensation that stole over me of knowing this man in the deepest recesses of his spirit, of knowing him as intimately as if I were him, or him me. The thought made me blush, but I did not question it, any more than I had questioned the honeybee in my closed fist. Perhaps he read this in the smile I ventured to offer, for he stepped inside the wreath of vines I occupied on the carpet and ducked his head to look into my face. "I am not wealthy," he said at last, "or handsome, and I'm a long way from refined. In other words, I am not the husband you deserve, Miss Fincher. But this is what I know. To wake up beside the person you cherish and who cherishes you in return. There is no better refuge from the world than that. Whatever hardships may come, and they do come, they will." He took a step closer. My heart was thumping so hard I had to sit down or collapse from lightheadedness. I sat. He hesitated, looking about for a straight chair to pull up beside me, but the only one in the room stood behind Father's desk, and I could see he did not want to take that liberty. After a moment, he improvised, resting his hip gingerly on the edge of the desk. His skin, as he leaned close to me, smelled like a sawn plank of cedar. "Despite what I feel," he said quietly, "and what I feel is genuine, resolute, I will not presume to lay claim to such a tender and unsullied heart as yours, fair girl, unless you tell me I am correct, that in the short time we have been acquainted, You have experienced affectionate regard for me? You recognize me in some way? He sat waiting for my answer, but not pressing for it. Because I was too flustered to look him in the face, I studied his left hand where it lay on the edge of the walnut desk. His big knuckles gripped the carved edge, the brown skin weathered and cross-hatched by scars acquired over the 2 years he had lived on battlefields and traveled rough country. Without knowing what I was doing, I lifted my own hand and placed it flat beside his on the desk, spreading my fingers in a vain attempt to increase the span. His eyes dropped from my face to our hands, and we compared them together, the dark and the pale, the rough and the soft, the tested and the untested, husband and wife. We looked at each other then and smiled. That's how it was decided, as simply as that. I believed him, you understand, about marriage being a refuge. I want to believe him still, but lifetimes have passed since I woke up beside my husband, and I can no longer claim to be cherished.
You weren't joking. I'm Caitlin Salamini, and this is my book, Empire of Glass, published by Ig Publishing. Thank you very much. I don't know if Robert and Elizabeth are here. I know you're also all really eager to get to the whiskey, so I will read very quickly, and you'll have no idea what I'm talking about. But my book, to give a little bit of an explainer, because I'm reading from a later section, it is written from many perspectives, and the frame of which is that an American woman has lived in China and has a very deep relationship with a family there, her host family in high school. She inherits a book which is written by a woman named Li Ming, and she is tasked to translate that book. The section I'm reading from is from the inherited text, and it is written from the perspective of her Chinese host father, Lao Wang, who is at this point in Gansu province during the sent-down period of the Cultural Revolution. And I'm just going to read a short section from that. There are footnotes to the text, lucky you. So if you haven't read footnotes since maybe some high school assigned reading, I apologize. But I will note the footnote as such. Okay. So, Lao Wang pretended not to hear Xiao Dong. Mr. Poet, get your lazy ass up. You have to see this. It was so early, Xiao Dong's mustache was not yet combed into its desired shape. Instead, it was bushy and morning rustled like a wild animal. Whatever Xiao Dong wanted to see must have been worth missing his grooming rituals. Wang stood, begrudgingly, his beidzi wrapped around him, an overstuffed winter kimono. Once outside their shallow cave with its makeshift tents, Xiaodong directed Wang's attention toward a flock of red-crowned cranes. Footnote 29. This is not as good. If I could be a crane, I wouldn't have to ask for your help, she said, as I uncoiled the thick rope and placed it on her lap to show her the length recommended. Don't you think we're going to look odd bringing rope onto the subway? She laughed. This is China. Everything's weird. Normal's what's not. At her side, the morphine tablet Baba left each day, a pin-sized remedy for pain but not the murmur in her lungs. Cold Mountain has so many wonders. Climbers all get scared, she said. And for the first time since she launched our plan, I wanted to strangle her, to mute a mouth that preferred too much nonsense. Back to the main text. A flock of red-crowned cranes that had landed on an outcropping below. The villagers likewise amassed. As greedy as a pack of wild dogs, hunched and devout, the men and women scoured the earth for small stones, for pebbles light but hard and rounded enough to spring from their slingshots. What are they? Wang asked Xiaodong, but as quickly as the words frosted the cold, the villagers raised their shots, leveling their gazes. The cranes, likely resting after a night migrating the chilled western skies, were entirely caught off guard by this amassing human front. In martial unison, the villagers gleefully released their rubber slingshots, arching improvised bullets toward the cliffs. The pebbles ricocheted off the rocks around Wang and Xiaodong, puffing yellow dust into the morning air. The cranes reacted slowly, flapping their heavy white wings and attempting to lift their bodies into the sky. One by one, they took to the air, successfully avoiding the shots of the villages, soaring over village streets, weaving shadows down alleyways along the silt-heavy Wei River. Wang never realized how beautiful the scene could be from here. On most days, he was preoccupied with the morning's task, shaving his face over a pot of campfire-heated water, using that same pot to warm rice gruel kept overnight in a cave. Now his gaze followed the cranes, how easily they traversed this landscape. He felt a strange expression cresting his face, a smile rising as the birds flew over the horizon, as the villagers' pebbles, late to the chase, seared the wind, missing their targets. Wang's beizi loosened, and the warmth of his body filled the air surrounding him. Fly, birds, fly. His bare shoulders donned the cloaked heat of the rising sun. Fei, to fly. Footnote 30. As in poet Han Shan's work, I sit beneath the cliff, quiet and alone, round moon in the middle of the skies, a bird ablaze. All things are seen mere shadows in its brilliance, that single wheel of perfect light. Alone, its spirit naturally comes clear, swallowed in emptiness in this cave of darkest mystery. Because of the finger pointing, I saw the moon. That moon became the pivot of my heart. Wang watched as the cranes departed, unperturbed by the pebbles leaving white feathers drifting over rocks, evidence of an evening's roost. But no, Wang suddenly realized, as he stepped closer to the edge, toes enjoying the warmth of sun-swept soil, he saw below, tucked beneath an overhang, a pair remained. They stood side by side, hobbling like nearly felled trees and flapping their large white wings unsuccessfully. Their necks careened in an unexpected dance, disbelieving this fate. How could they not summon the strength for the one instinctual motion they'd known all their lives? A bird without flight. What was a bird without flight? And I will stop there so you can get to the party. Thank you.